I want to start with something that happened to me about 2 years after the collapse. I described it in the first video of this series. I was in a new professional context, different industry, different people, different city. Everything on the surface was genuinely different. And within 8 months, I had recreated with remarkable precision the same dynamic that had contributed to the collapse of the previous one. Same feeling of being undervalued, same withdrawal response, same slow erosion of engagement, same eventual implosion, different cast, identical script. And I remember sitting with that with the specific discomfort of recognizing that I had somehow produced the same outcome in completely different conditions and thinking, this isn't bad luck, this isn't circumstance, this is me. Not me as in I'm broken, I'm the problem, I deserve this. Me as in something in me is generating this. Something I haven't examined is producing this result reliably across different contexts. And until I can see what that is, I will keep producing it. That recognition, painful as it was the beginning of understanding what the mirror law actually is. Not a spiritual metaphor, not a new age reassurance that the universe is friendly and everything is meant. A precise, observable, larger mechanical phenomenon. Your external life reflects your internal life, not your conscious intentions, not your values as you articulate them, your actual interior, the unexamined parts, the unresolved parts, the parts operating below the level of conscious awareness. That's the mirror law. And this video is about how to read it clearly enough to actually use it. Act number 2. Why the common version fails. The mirror law is one of the oldest and most widely cited principles in metaphysical and spiritual teaching. Versions of it appear in Hermetic traditions, in Hindu philosophy, in Stoic thought, in modern psychology. And it's also one of the most consistently misapplied principles in the entire self-development space. So before I give you the precise version, I need to show you why the common version fails. Because the common version causes real harm. The common version goes like this. Your thoughts create your reality. Your outer world is a direct reflection of your inner world. If you change your thinking, you change your life. You've heard this, right? Probably many times in many different packages. Here is the problem. In this version, the mirror is a direct, real-time reflection of your conscious mental state. Think positive thoughts, attract positive outcomes. Think negative thoughts, attract negative outcomes. Which means, and follows this to its logical conclusion, that when something bad happens to you, it is because of something bad in your thinking. The person who gets sick, the child who suffers, the community that experiences disaster, the person who is discriminated against, exploited, or harmed by systems and circumstances generally outside of their control. What were they thinking that attracted this? That's where the common version ends up. And it's not just intellectually wrong, it's cruel. It converts the mirror from a tool for a self-examination into a weapon for self-blame. And it places the entire burden of external reality onto the individual's interior state in a way that is both psychologically damaging and factually inaccurate. The common version needs to be retired. What I'm about to give you is more limited in scope than the common version and more genuinely useful because of that limitation. Act number 3, the precise version. Here is the precise version of the mirror law. The patterns in your external life, specifically the recurring ones, the ones that appear across different contexts and different relationships, tend to reflect the unexamined structure in your interior. Let me identify every word that's doing specific work in that sentence. Patterns, not events, not the random, singular, genuinely circumstantial. Patterns, recurring sequences, the things that happens again. That's what the mirror is reflecting. Not every external experience is a mirror. Some things just happen. The mirror law applies to what keeps happening. In your external life, not all of the external reality, your external life, the specific texture of your specific experience, your relationships, your professional dynamics, the quality of your daily interactions, not the weather, not geopolitics, not other people's choices that have nothing to do with you, tend to reflect, not always, not with certainty, not mechanically, tend to. There are exceptions and hard cases. I'll address those later. Unexamined structures. This is the most important quality. Not your conscious thoughts, not your stated values, the unexamined parts, the belief you're operating from without knowing you're operating from them. The fears that are running decisions you think you're making freely. The wounds that are shaping perception you think are neutral. The mirror reflects what's unexamined because what's examined tends to change. You can't fully see a belief and continue operating from it unconsciously. The seeing itself begins to shift the operating. In your interior, not your fault, not your punishment, not evidence of your inadequacy. The interior, the psychological structure, the belief system, the attachment patterns, the unreserved material, neutral, descriptive, workable. That's the precise version. Smaller than the common version, more honest, and because it's more honest, actually useful. Fact number 4, the evidence base. I want to spend a few minutes on the evidence base for this. Because while I'm presenting the mirror law in a metaphysical frame, the core phenomenon it describes has substantial support in psychology and neuroscience. You don't have to take it on faith. Attachment theory. The psychologist John Bowlby developed attachment theory in the Midwestern. The psychologist John Bowlby developed attachment theory in mid-20th century. His central finding, subsequently replicated extensively, is that the relational patterns formed in early childhood becomes internal working models, templates, blueprints for how relationships work, what can be expected from other people, and what is safe to offer in return. These internal working models operate largely below conscious awareness, and they shape with remarkable consistency the relational patterns that show up in adult life. The person with an anxious attachment style, formed in response to inconsistent early caregiving, tends to recreate anxious relational dynamics with partners who are inconsistent, even when these partners were initially presented as available and reliable. The person with an avoidant attachment style tends to recreate distance, pulling back when closeness becomes available, finding reasons the connection isn't right, maintaining the reliable pattern the internal working model predicts as normal. Not because you're choosing this consciously, because the template is a running the selection and the interpretation process below awareness. That's the mirror law in empirically validated form. The internal structure producing consistent external patterns. Confirmation, bias, and perception. Cognitive psychology has extensively documented the degree to which our perceptions are shaped by our existing beliefs and expectations. We don't see reality and then form beliefs. We form beliefs most unconsciously, mostly early, and then see reality through them. The person who believes at an examined level that they are fundamentally unlovable will interpret ambiguous relational signals as confirmation of that belief. The slight delay in a text response, the distracted quality in a partner's attention, the moment of criticism from a friend. Neutral data run through the unexamined belief becomes confirmation, which means the belief is not just predicting the experience, it is partially constructing it, shaping what gets noticed, how it gets interpreted, and therefore what it becomes in the person's experience of their life. Interpersonal neurobiology. The neuroscientist Dan Siegel and others working in the field of interpersonal neurobiology have documented the degree to which our relational histories are encoded in our nervous systems, in our physiological response to the social situations. The body remembers what the mind has rationalized. The nervous system carries the pattern even when the narrative has been revised, which means the mirror isn't just psychological, it is physiological. The unexamined interior that the mirror reflects includes the nervous system's learned responses, the threat responses that activate in situations that resembles early dangerous ones, the withdrawal responses that fire before conscious choice is possible, the collapse response that happens in the body before the mind has had time to assess the actual situation. All of that is workable, but only once it is visible. The mirror makes it visible. At 5, the 3 levels of reflection. The mirror reflects at 3 distinct levels. Understanding which level you are reading matters for how you interpret what you see. Level 1, relational reflection. This is the most immediate and most accessible level of the mirror. The pattern in your close relationship, romantic, familial, professional, friendships, are the clearest external reflection of your interior relational structure. What you consistently attract, what you consistently repel, the dynamics that keep appearing regardless of the specific person, the roles you keep finding yourself in, the emotional sequences that keeps completing in the same way. These are not random. They are being generated partially, not entirely, by an interior relational template that is selecting for, interpreting toward, and behaviorally producing consistent outcomes. The question to bring to level 1 reflection: what kind of people do I consistently attract? What qualities do they share at the level of dynamic rather than personality? What roles do I find myself in across different relationships? The caretaker. What roles do I consistently find myself in across different relationships? The caretaker, the pursued, the one who holds things together, the one who eventually withdraws. What emotional sequences keep completing in the same way, regardless of the specific relationship or the specific precipitating event? The answer are the mirror, not judgment, data. Level 2, environmental reflections. This level is subtler and often more surprising. Environments you consistently find yourself in, the workplaces, the communities, the physical spaces you're drawn to and repelled by, also reflect interior structures. Not in a mystical sense, in the selection and interpretation sense. You're making choices, most of them below full conscious awareness about where to be, what to pursue, what to stay in, and what to leave. These choices are being shaped by interior structure. The person who consistently ends up in the chaotic professional environments, even when they start in stable ones, is selecting for something or interpreting neutral environments as more chaotic than they are, or behaving in ways that generate chaos, usually some or combination of all three. 2 questions to bring to level 2 reflections. What qualities do the environments I consistently find myself in share? Not the surface qualities, the interior quality of them. How do they feel? Are there environments I am consistently drawn toward that are ultimately depleting? Consistently repelled by that might be actually nourishing. What does the pattern of my environmental choices say about what feels normal to me, even if what feels normal is not what is good for me? That last question is important. Normal and good are not the same thing. The interior structure was often formed in conditions that were not good. What feels familiar feels normal. What feels normal can feel like home, even when home was difficult. The mirror at level 2 shows you what you've been mistaking for home. Level 3, self-conscious reflection. This is the deepest level of the mirror and the hardest to access directly. The story tells about your life, the narrative of who you are, why things have happened in the way they have, what you're capable of and what you're not, is itself a reflection of interior structures. And it is also generating your experiences of reality in real time. The person who carries an unexamined belief that they are fundamentally not enough, not talented enough, not worthy enough, not capable enough, will narrate their life in a way that confirms that belief. Successes get minimized or attributed to luck. Failures get amplified and attributed to essential inadequacy. The story stays consistent because the narrator is filling the data. And the story, once established and repeated, begins to function as a self-fulfilling structure. The person who believes that they are fundamentally not enough will, at critical moments, behave in ways that produce not enough outcomes, will not apply for the role, will not make the ask, will exit the relationship before the rejection they've decided is coming. The mirror at level 3 reflects the story you're telling yourself about yourself. And that story is shaping what you attempt, what you interpret, and ultimately what you produce in your life with it consistently that make it look like faith. It isn't faith. It's a story, and stories can be examined, questioned, and revised. But only once you can see them clearly enough to recognize them as stories rather than as neutral observation of a fixed reality. Act number 6, how to read the mirror. Reading the mirror is a skill. It has specific steps, and it has specific orientation that has been established before the steps are useful. The orientation first. Reading the mirror requires curiosity, not judgment. The moment you shift from what is the reflection to what is wrong with me, you've lost the mirror. You're now looking at a distorted surface that will only show you what you already believe about your inadequacy. The mirror is not a verdict, it is information. The way a scientist approaches data, not hoping for a particular result, not afraid of what it might show, genuinely curious about what's actually there. And if you can hold that orientation, and it takes practice, especially if the mirror is showing you something uncomfortable, the reading becomes possible. Step 1, identify the recurring pattern. You need a specific concrete pattern to read, not a vague sense that things keep going wrong. A specific sequence with a specific emotional signature. Use the pattern tracking system from video 5 if you've been doing that. Your log will have patterns already identified. If not, start here. What is the one recurrent situation in your life that produces the strongest sense of, here we go again? Name it specifically, not relationship don't work out for me. More precisely, I consistently find myself in a relationship where I feel unseen. I respond by withdrawing, and the relationship either ends up or stabilizes at permanent distance. The specificity is necessary. Vague patterns produce vague readers. Precise patterns produce actionable information. Step 2, look for the interior state that precedes the pattern. Before the external event, before the other person does the thing, before the situation develops the way it always does, there is an interior state, a perception, a felt sense, an interpretation of early signals. What is it? In the example above, the person who consistently feels unseen, the interior state often precedes an actual evidence of being unseen. There's a hypervigilance to early signals, a region of ambiguous cues as confirmation, a sense of the familiar sequence beginning even before the sequence has actually begun. That interior state is the operating structure. That's what the mirror is reflecting. Not the other person's behavior, not the circumstances, the interior state that is selectively perceiving, interpreting, and responding to external reality in a way that produces consistent outcomes. Step number 3. Trace the interior state to its origin. Where did this interior state come from? In what context did this perception, this felt sense, this interpretation first make sense? Almost always, the answer is early childhood or adolescence, a context in which the interior state was an accurate reading of the available environment. The child who was generally unseen, whose emotional needs were consistently missed or dismissed, developed a hypervigilance to signs of being unseen. That hypervigilance was adaptive. It was an accurate perceptual system for a real condition. The problem is that the perceptual system didn't update when the condition changed. It kept running in an adult relationship where the actual conditions were different, sometimes dramatically different, but where the same hypervigilance found the same signals because it was looking for them. You are not broken. You are running an outdated perceptual system. That system made sense once. It is now generating a mirror it was designed to detect, even in condition where that mirror isn't there. Step number 4. Ask what it would take to update the system. Not how do I think my way out of this pattern. The thinking hasn't worked. It's been running for years. What would the interior need, the actual fear underneath the pattern need, in order to have the evidence that the old operating system is no longer necessary? This question doesn't have a quick answer, but it is the right question because it locates the change where the change actually needs to happen, in the interior condition that the pattern is organized around, not in the surface behavior the pattern produces. At number 7, the hard cases. I said earlier that I would address the hard cases, the situation where the mirror law framework can cause harm rather than eliminate. I want to be direct about these. Hard cases 1, trauma and harm caused by others. Some of what shows up in people's external lives, abuse, exploitation, discrimination, violence, is not a reflection of the interior. It is harm caused by other people and by systems. Full stop. Applying the mirror law to these situations, asking what in someone's interior attracted or generated the harm they experienced, is not just unhelpful. It is a form of victim blaming that compounds the original damage. The mirror law applies to recurrent patterns that have a significant interior component. It does not apply to harm that was done to someone by another person or system. The distinction requires honesty and care. If you're using mirror law as a framework and find yourself or someone else using it to explain away harm that was genuinely perpetrated, stop. That is a misuse of the framework and it causes damage. Hard case number 2, systematic inequality. Some patterns in people's external lives reflect not their interior structure, but their structural position in systems of inequality. The person who consistently encounters discrimination is not reflecting an interior state. They are navigating a system that is treating them in a particular way based on characteristics that have nothing to do with their psychology. The mirror law is a framework for examining the interior generated components of recurrent pattern. It is not a framework for explaining away systematic realities as personal psychology. Hold both. Interior work invaluable and real. Systematic realities are also real. These are not competing claims. Hard case number 3. Confirmation bias in the reading. The mirror law framework, like any framework, can be used to confirm what you have already believed about yourself. The person with a deep, unexamined belief in their own inadequacy can use the mirror law to produce a more sophisticated self-blame than they had before. The mirror is showing me how deeply broken I am. That's not a reading. That's the original wound using the framework as a new vehicle. The quality of a genuine mirror reading is curiosity and movement. Something becomes clearer and something becomes workable. If your reading of the mirror is producing paralysis or intensifying self-attack, that's not the framework working. That's a framework being used against you by the very structure you're trying to examine. In that case, put the mirror down, come back to it with support, or work with a therapist who can help you read it with more steadiness than you currently have available. The practice. The mirror law is a monthly exercise, not daily, not weekly. It requires enough distance from immediate experience to see clearly and enough recent experience to have material to work with. Once a month, set aside 45 minutes, no interruptions. Bring your pattern tracking log if you have one. If not, bring your honest memory of the past 30 days. Work through 4 questions in sequence. Write the answers. Don't edit as you go. Let the first honest answer come before the considered one. Question 1. What pattern was most active this month? Not the most dramatic event, the most familiar sequence. The one with that quality of, here we are again. Question 2. What was the interior state that preceded or accompanied it? Before the external event developed, what were you feeling? What were you perceiving? What interpretation were you making of early signals? Be specific. Not I felt bad. More precisely, I felt a specific combination of hypervigilance and preemptive withdrawal that I recognized from other instances of this pattern. Question 3. What is this interior state protecting me from feeling? Underneath the hypervigilance is a fear. Underneath the withdrawal is a wound. Underneath the self-sabotage is a belief. What is it? You may not be able to answer this fully. You may get a partial answer. Write what you can access. The parts you can't access are not lost. Their surface as the practice deepens. Question 4. What would I need to believe or experience for this inner state to no longer be necessary? Not how would I think differently. What would need to be true, or what would need to be demonstrated to me through actual experience for the protective response to be no longer be required? This question points towards a specific interior work, and sometimes the specific relational or experiential conditions that would allow the pattern to begin to change. That's the direction, not the solution, the direction. Work with it for a month. Bring the same question back the following month. See what has shifted. The mirror doesn't change all at once. It changes the way all interior work changes, gradually, honestly, and the specific texture of daily life, one pattern at a time. Let's close this out. There are particular moments in working with the mirror law that I want to describe, because it's a moment the whole framework becomes real rather than conceptual. It's a moment you catch the pattern activated in real time, not in retrospect, reviewing the mind, not in the 45-minute practice session, in the actual moment, midway through the conversation, inside the professional dynamics, at the beginning of the familiar sequence. And you see it, not with judgment, not with the familiar weight of, here we are again, I'm doing it again. Something is wrong with me. With something closer to recognition, and almost like meeting something you're known for a long time, but never quite seen directly. There it is. I know this. I know what this is. And that recognition in the gap between the activation and the automatic response, there's a choice that wasn't there before. Not always the ability to make the different choice. The ability often comes later, gradually, after many instances of recognition. But the recognition itself is the beginning. You cannot choose differently what you cannot see clearly. The mirror makes it visible. And the visibility, honest, non-judgmental, genuinely curious visibility, is wherever real change begins. Not in the dramatic decision, not in the declaration of transformation, in the quiet, repeated act of seeing what's actually there. That's what the mirror is for. Not to show you how broken you are, to show you what's been running in the dark, so you can finally bring it to light. Next in this series, we do a deep dive on energy economy. What it means that everything in your life is either building or depleting your fundamental capacity. How to map your actual energy flow honestly, and the specific work of rebuilding an energy economy that sustains the life you're actually trying to live. The link is above. Take care of yourself.